Alright, good morning Sec 3. So we are going to be continuing from where we left off at our previous lesson on Thursday. So we have learned that there are 5 stages of nutrition. And what is nutrition? Nutrition is the process, nutrition is the process in which we actually obtain food. And it is actually very important because you know that food is essential for our daily functioning. Okay, so nutrition is a process by which organisms obtain food and energy, and there are 5 main stages, starting with ingestion, digestion, and then after digestion we need to take in the digested food into our cells, and this is known as absorption. Then after the cells take in the food, they still need to do something with it, right? Because for example, when you earn your salary or money, you need to make sure that you can use it. So you need to make sure that you can use your salary, and just like your cells, after they absorb the food, they also need to make sure that they must be able to use the food. And this process is known as assimilation. And last but not least, whatever that is not used, whatever that is not digested, usually your vegetables or your fruits, these will all form your fibers. They will be removed from your body in a form of feces or stools, and this is known as the last process, egestion. So there are 5 main stages. Alright, so let's turn to the next page. So basically you can see that in this diagram you can see the person with the mouth open, and you can see the tractor, a construction truck here, actually putting food in between, and it's a long tube starting from the mouth going all the way down. This is known as your alimentary canal. And just like you know, outside your school there is a canal, right, at the park connector. The canal is something that is very, very long and continuous. Your alimentary canal starting from your mouth all the way to your anus is actually one long continuous tube. Okay, so the first process, can you remember what it is? Taking of the food? Very good. It's known as ingestion. So after ingestion, just like this green little person actually putting food into the mouth, you can see there are few people over here actually breaking down the food from very big pieces to smaller pieces, right? So this is actually known as digestion. Okay, the second thing is food is actually broken down by digestion, and this is the breakdown of large insoluble food molecules. Now you learn in chemistry, insoluble means that they are unable to dissolve, and because they are very large, they cannot pass through our membrane. Do you remember? Our membrane is actually partially permeable, right? So in order for nutrients to go into our cells, they must be very small. So if you look at your chicken wing, obviously your chicken wing cannot fit into your cell because the chicken wing is very big. So the chicken pieces must be broken down into small, soluble. So you notice it's the exact opposite. From large, it becomes small. From insoluble, it becomes soluble. Once it is small and is soluble, when it's small, it's able to pass through. And when it's soluble, after it passed through, it can dissolve into the bloodstream. So it can be absorbed into the bloodstream. Okay, so at any point of time, if you need to stop the video so that you can copy down your answers, please do so. Okay? Now, after digestion, remember, once we have all the small soluble substances already, we want to absorb them. So if you go down here, you can see this red tube here, right? This red tube here actually means the blood. So you can see all these black small soluble nutrients actually being absorbed by the blood. Okay, and this is actually your cells. So all these nutrients will enter the blood, and then the blood will transport it to the cells. This is known as absorption. So, after digestion, digested food is absorbed into the blood. Then the blood will then carry them to the liver. So the blood with the food must first go to the liver, because the liver is like a factory. For example, if you want to buy biscuits, you don't go to the factory to buy the biscuit, right? You go to NTUC or Sheng Siong or Giant to buy the biscuit. But actually, where do the biscuits come from? They come from the factory. So before the cells, which is like your NTUC, can get the biscuit or the food, they must actually go to the liver first to be processed. Alright, now once the blood goes to the liver and transports it to the rest of the body, you see all these pink little circles, right? These are your body cells. You notice that the pink circles now have got black dots, right? So that means they are already absorbing all the nutrients into the cells. Why do they want to take in nutrients? right? They want to make new cells, okay? They want to make new cells, or they want to make new parts of cells. This is quite important. So, okay, so you may want to actually take out your highlighter and actually highlight that this is actually an important process. Okay, this process is known as assimilation. When the cells use the food which is small and soluble already that has been absorbed to make new cells or to make things for the cells. Okay, this is known as assimilation. Now in English, assimilate means to be something, to become something. So if I say I want to assimilate something, means I want to be like that something. So same thing here, the cells are actually undergoing assimilation because they want to use the nutrients to be something, either to be new, to repair, or to make new things. Now at the end, can you see that there are some of these black little circles here? And you can see this car that is being driven away by this green man, right? So basically all these big circles are nutrients that have not been digested. That means they are still large and they are still insoluble. So they are actually undigested food. Only digested food will become small and soluble and they will be absorbed. Everything else that is not digested is basically undigested and you have to remove them. That's why you go to the toilet, right, to do your business. And I'm not going to say the S word, why you use the toilet. Okay, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so this undigested food is removed from the body. Because can you imagine if you don't remove your feces from your body, you're basically accumulating rubbish in your body. You're like a walking dustbin. And we do not want that. Our body cannot hold undigested food for too long. Okay, so we have to remove it. And this last process is known as digestion. So I would like you to see actually this simple animation over here. Okay, you can see from the start all the way through the alimentary canal. Okay, then undigested food will be removed from the anus. So if you follow this blue color dot, actually the alimentary canal is one long tube starting from the mouth to the stomach, to the small intestine, then to the large intestine, and then all the way to the anus. This is known as the alimentary canal. But in this picture here, you can also see this red color shape and this green color shape. But you notice that the blue circle is actually not going into the red shape. You check again. You notice, the blue circle is actually not in the red or the green shape. Now later on, we will figure out why is this red and green shape here, green organs, part of the digestive system, but they are not inside the alimentary canal because they are not attached to this long tube. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, the next part, which is 5.1.2. Okay, now food goes through a long winding. Winding means coiling. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down before the body can obtain its nutrients. And this long tube is known as the alimentary canal. It's not a digestive system. The digestive system consists of the alimentary canal and other organs. Okay, if you're just talking about the mouth, the gullet, the stomach, the small and large intestine, and your anus, this is the alimentary canal. The amazing thing is this canal is actually 8 to 10 meters long and it contains muscles in the walls. Now, you know when you exercise, muscles actually contract and they relax. Okay, so because this alimentary canal is so long, you cannot imagine, can you imagine 8 to 10 meters, how to fit in your body? You are probably only about maybe 1.7, 1.8 for the tallest of the people in our class. It's impossible to fit something that is 8 to 10 meters long. So what do? Just like the wire, after you buy your new iPhone, you notice that your wire, which is the charger, or your earphones, they actually put it round and round around the plastic container, right? So same thing, the alimentary canal must be coiled to fit inside the body. And because this alimentary canal is a long tube, so how does food actually travel along the alimentary canal? Is it by gravity? Actually, because it has muscles, the muscles in the alimentary canal actually have wave-like contractions. Now you look at this diagram over here, you can see it's wave-like, right? Because you see it's going in and then out, in and then out. So every time it goes in, See, it goes in, it pushes the food down. Every time it goes in, it pushes the food down. This is known as peristalsis. And it's very similar to like pressing your toothpaste in your Colgate. You know, when you press one end of the toothpaste, right? One end of your Colgate or your Dali, you can see that the toothpaste actually comes out from the other side, right? That's very similar to peristalsis. So you just imagine your finger is like the muscles. Every time you push the toothpaste, it's like your muscles contracting to push food, and then your toothpaste is like the food. So in order for you to push the toothpaste out, you need to push the Colgate tube, right? So these contractions along the walls because of muscles actually help to push food along. But you may imagine if the food is very dry, it's going to be very difficult to push the food. For example, you notice, right, some of you have constipation. Wow, it's terrible, man. You can sit on the toilet bowl for 15-20 minutes, right? And then your feces still cannot come out, correct? Then it's very painful. So what happens in constipation? You don't drink enough water. So in order for the food to actually go down the esophagus very smoothly here, it needs to be soft. And the only way is that the cells in these muscular walls actually secrete mucus. Now mucus is like a sticky fluid that actually makes the food soft. Now when it makes the food soft, it becomes easier to push. Alright, so let's have a look at this animation here. So you can see that this small piece of food is actually going down the esophagus or the gullet into the stomach. You see from the top. And you can see wave-like. Why is it wave-like? Because it's going like a wave. You see, it's pushing the food. As it pushes the food actually goes down from the gullet all the way to the stomach. So you can see that the muscles are actually constantly pushing the food. Without the muscles, it's impossible for the food to actually go down. Alright. So what does your alimentary canal of your humans consist? Now remember, the word canal means tube, and it's long and it's continuous. From start to finish, there is no stop. Okay, so it consists of your mouth. You can see in this diagram here, your mouth. It consists of your esophagus. Now in Sec 1 or Sec 2, you will have learned that this is the gullet. But now that you're in Sec 3, you must learn how to spell it. Okay, you can spell it with the O. You can also spell it without the O. It's still acceptable by N levels. Then after the esophagus is your stomach. Then after your stomach is your small intestine. And if you have a small intestine, you will also have a large intestine. And at your large intestine, okay, before your poo-poo actually comes out, it gets stored in what we consider the rectum. And then, of course, your undigested food will be removed via the anus. Now, remember the process. This is not ingestion, but this is exit, right? Exiting from the body. So we spell it with an E. So it's called egestion. Now, if you notice over here, you can see that there are a few organs that are very close to, that means is very close to you. It's very close to the alimentary canal. It's very near, okay? And you have the liver and you have the pancreas. But you notice this food is not entering the liver and it's not entering the canal, because the liver and the liver and the pancreas, okay, they are not part of the alimentary canal, but they are very closely associated. Now, what do I mean by closely associated? It means that they are very near to it and they play a very important role. So look at what this person is pointing to. Now, a lot of students always think that the liver, the gallbladder, which you can't see in this animation here, and the okay, so sorry for the technical difficulty. Alright, so we said that the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas, if you notice here, alright, they are actually close to the alimentary canal, but they are actually not part of the alimentary canal. So we say that they are closely associated. That means they do not belong to the alimentary canal, but they are near to it. So if you look at the food actually doesn't go into the liver, neither does it go into the pancreas, but it only goes into the alimentary canal. Okay, now why is it the liver is not part? The liver, gallbladder and pancreas, they are not part, but why must it be associated? Because they play a very important role in food digestion. Okay, so let's look at your entire digestive system. Now you need to know this because in the N levels it's very important. They will ask you to label this. Alright, so we first have the teeth, which is found in the mouth. Now remember, the mouth is part of the first step of nutrition, which is ingestion. Then you can see that, when you in your mouth, when you chew your food doesn't remain dry, right? Basically, there is saliva. So saliva is actually produced by your salivary glands. And then after your mouth, your teeth actually chews the food and the saliva mixes with the food, your food actually becomes very soft and it's actually rolled up into small little ball-shaped particles. Now these food balls are then actually swallowed down into your throat and into your esophagus. So this is known as your esophagus. Okay, then you notice that this esophagus is connected directly to the stomach. Okay, then this is the third part of your alimentary canal. Now if you look at Miss Lee's arrow, from the stomach I will then move into this small particular tube here. Now this tube is known as the small intestines. And you can tell the small intestine is like a wire, right? It's basically coiled because the small intestine is very long. In order for it to fit in your abdomen area, it needs to be coiled, okay? And after the small intestine, it will then be connected. You can see this point here, right? It is actually connected to the large intestine. And then this is where all your undigested food will enter before it accumulates in this small little area here on top of the anus known as the rectum. And then basically when you go to the toilet to do your business and to release feces, remember at the start is ingestion because you're putting food in your mouth. Now you want to release or exit the undigested food, so this is known as egestion, which takes place in the anus. Now you notice that there are 3 organs that I have purposely left out. Now this is your liver, okay, then this small little circular shape here is known as your this leaf shape here, okay, first of all, is known as your pancreas. And last but not least, this circular shape here, which is basically in your liver, is known as the gallbladder. Now, why did Miss Lee put these 3 organs in blue? Because I want to tell you that this is the entire digestive system. So the digestive system is made up of the yellow boxes, which is the alimentary canal, and the blue boxes, which are your closely associated organs. That means these blue organs here are actually not part of the canal, but they are close to the canal because they produce substances that are very important for digestion. Okay, so let's look at this very simple question, which you will find in your notes. Would food be able to move down the alimentary canal when you are upside down? Okay, so before we do that, okay, so that's quite an interesting video for you. So you can tell that the person is actually still eating. You can see the person swallowing, right? So it's against gravity. So how is that even possible? So the answer is, will you still be able to move food down your alimentary canal if you're upside down? The answer is yes, definitely. This is because your food does not go down the canal because of gravity. If not, how do astronauts eat? In the earlier part of the video, you saw the astronauts were able to eat the carrots and the cheese cubes even though they were floating in space because there is zero gravity. Why is that so? Because of the amazing power of peristalsis. Now you remember, peristalsis is the pushing of food down, right? You can see these 3 pictures here as your 2 muscles actually squeeze each other here. All right, as your 2 muscles squeeze each other here, okay, as they squeeze it here, the food actually goes down. As they squeeze even more, the food goes down. And if they squeeze even more, it goes down. So they actually go down in wave-like contractions. That's why we say it's wave-like. So you can see Miss Lee's arrows, it's like a wave-like contraction. So because of the process of peristalsis, we say that the muscles in the alimentary canal basically cause peristalsis. So peristalsis is caused because the muscles will contract and they will push the food along. So that means food doesn't travel down because of gravity. Of course, gravity can pull something down, alright? But even in the absence of gravity in space, you can still swallow food because of your action of your muscles. And because of your muscles contracting, they cause this process known as peristalsis. Okay, so now before we move on to the next part, which is 5.2, we're going to watch an overview of how food travels in our digestive system. Now remember, our digestive system is actually made up of our alimentary canal together with our liver, our gallbladder, as well as our pancreas. Now, these three organs are closely associated with the alimentary canal. Your alimentary canal is actually one long tube, but because it's so long, it has to be coiled. And that's why your small and your large intestines are actually coiled. Okay, so let's watch this simple video before we move on to the next segment.
And with her new teeth, she can take on more solid foods. Digestion starts in the mouth. Teeth grind up the food. Then, special glands under the tongue pump out saliva to help break down and lubricate the food on its 12-hour, 13-foot journey through the gut. It'll pass from the stomach into the coils of the small intestine before finally passing into the large intestine. Waves of contracting muscle keep the food moving, a process called peristalsis. These contractions are so powerful, we can even eat upside down. For the first time, a new camera shows a high-definition view of how food travels through our bodies and into our stomachs. Food enters the stomach through a hole at the top. The stomach is a bag of muscle that churns, squashes, and squeezes food into liquid. At the same time, acids break the food down. The stomach walls protect themselves with a lining of mucus. Without it, the acids could digest parts of the stomach itself, causing stomach ulcers. About an hour later, the stomach squeezes the broken down food out through a tiny hole called the pyloric sphincter. The food enters the small intestine, an 11-foot coil of tube where we absorb most of the nutrients. The interior wall of the small intestine is lined with millions of microscopic projections called villi. These increase the surface area of the gut, making it easier to absorb nutrients. First, the pancreas pumps out a juice that neutralizes stomach acid. Then bile from the liver breaks down the fats into tiny droplets. Smaller droplets are easier for the intestine to absorb. After an hour and a half, the small intestine has absorbed most of the nutrients from the food. It's time for what remains to move on. It enters the large intestine through this, the ileocecal sphincter, a valve that keeps our food from going back where it came from. What's left is a mix of waste food and dead cells from the walls of the gut. The large intestine's main job is to extract water from it. Lots of bacteria live here too, but it isn't because of an infection. We actually need them. They produce enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates in our food, carbohydrates we couldn't otherwise digest. Finally, after about 12 hours, we expel what's left of our first meal.
Okay, I'm not sure whether you enjoyed the video, but actually as a bio teacher, that's really intriguing. It's so amazing to see how people can just put a camera inside you to actually observe the process of digestion when in the days without medical technology, this would not have been possible. But you saw how the food was actually broken up, squashed, mashed up in the stomach. And then you saw how the small intestine was so coiled. And you saw the surface of the small intestine, right? It looked like it had like many root hair cells. But of course, it's not root hair cell because we are not plants. But you saw all those projections, which is very similar to the root hair. Remember, why must your root hair be long? Because you want to increase. Very good. I can hear some of you all mouthing the words surface area to volume ratio. When you increase the surface area, there are more substances that you can absorb. And the small intestine wants to do that, because the small intestine's job is to ensure that digestion is complete and that you are able to now move on to the third stage of nutrition, which is absorption. Okay? Alright, so now let's move on to 5.1.3, which is to look at the different functions of the digestive system. Okay, so I will probably end the lecture after I finish all the different functions of the different parts of the digestive system. So now remember what Miss Lee is saying. I'm talking about the digestive system. That means it's the alimentary canal plus the three organs: liver, gallbladder, and your pancreas. Okay, so we are looking at the long tube together with the three organs that are closely associated with it. Now at the start, the very beginning, this is known as the mouth. Okay, at any point of time, you will probably need to pause the video because you will need to do a lot of writing here. Okay, so what does your mouth do? Remember, the first step of nutrition is Yes, it's ingestion. And what do you do? Now, if you stare at the food, no digestion can take place, right? Because the food is not in your body. So in order to kickstart the process of digestion, you must put food in the body. So the mouth actually takes in food through a process known as ingestion. And you have your teeth. What does your teeth do? Your teeth will actually chew the food into, very good, smaller pieces. Now remember, so what's the purpose of these smaller pieces? Remember, you want to increase surface area to volume ratio. So you want to make the food from very big to very, very small. Now you might be saying, so Miss Lee, is this is all the starch going to be digested to glucose here? No, because your bread is still bread, but there are smaller pieces of bread. So chewing the food is not a chemical reaction. It is a physical it's a physical process. Okay. Now in your mouth, you also have salivary glands, right? Salivary glands are the ones that actually produce your saliva. So it produces saliva because saliva contains a very important enzyme. Now remember, we just learned the chapter of enzymes, right? Your enzymes actually do a very important thing. They break chemical bonds. Okay, they break the bonds that hold the molecules together. So the name of this enzyme is known as amylase. Now, amylase actually helps to digest starch. This is a very important term. So the very first process that takes place in the mouth is chewing of the food. The second process is that your saliva, which contains amylase, will help to digest starch. Notice, amylase does not digest protein or fats. Remember, your enzymes are extremely, because of the lock and key, what is that? Very good, I can hear it. They are extremely specific. And because they are extremely specific, amylase can only break down starch. So amylase is the lock and starch is the key. Okay? So after the food is being chewed up, okay, and being rolled into small little pieces mixed with the saliva that contains amylase, it will then move from the mouth all the way down to the esophagus. Now, the esophagus, there is no enzyme produced. There is also no teeth in the esophagus, so we say that there is no breakdown or breakup of food. So the main function of esophagus is just to push food, and since it's to push food, look at the P. What is this? It's related to the wave-like contractions for you to make sure that the food goes down, just like you press your toothpaste. It's known as peristalsis, because they want to push food to the stomach. So let's move on. Okay, so now we move on to the stomach. The stomach is actually elastic. It is also very muscular, and you notice the word is very thick. That means the muscles are really a lot in the stomach. And you know that when you have muscles, means there must be, very good, there must be contraction. That means there is actually contraction that is taking place inside the stomach. Why is that so? Because the muscles in the stomach walls want to contract to mix the food. You know, just like if you want to make fruit juice, you put your watermelon, your apple, your orange inside the blender, right? Then the blender with the knife will spin very fast and chop all the fruit pieces and then make them into juice for you, right? You go and buy your pao pao cha. They also have bubble tea. They also have fruit juice. Then you see how they make the fruit juice. They put it in a blender. Your stomach is actually known as a blender. Although it doesn't have any knives, but it actually blends the food together. Okay, so it mixes the food. And when it mixes the food just like a blender, it basically breaks the food into even smaller pieces. Now, this breaking is not making it into soluble molecules. It's still food pieces, okay, but it has not been there's no chemical reaction just yet, because muscles got no chemical reaction, only you have enzyme. So the first enzyme that we talked about was amylase, right? Now in the stomach we meet a second enzyme, but this enzyme is produced together with an acid, and then this acid plus enzyme is known as gastric juice. Now some of you if you don't eat you can get gastric, right, which is a very painful sensation that you get in your stomach. So actually gastric juice, why do you get this painful sensation? And if you are not prompt in eating your meals, not punctual, every time you want to go and fast because you think that you want to lose weight and you want to diet, actually you heard just now in the video, right, this acid actually can digest the walls of your stomach, causing a hole, causing a wound, causing an ulcer. And that's how people get gastric ulcers. So this gastric juice is actually made up of an acid, and this acid you learned before in chemistry is actually HCl, hydrochloric acid, and the pH, look at the pH, guys, it is actually pH 2. pH 2 is actually very, very, very acidic. Now you know that enzymes are affected by pH and temperature, right? And you know that every enzyme got the optimum, that means best pH, best temperature. In your body, for humans, the optimum temperature for enzymes is 37 degrees Celsius, because that's our body temperature. However, this gastric juice, which contains hydrochloric acid at pH 2, actually also has an enzyme. And this enzyme is responsible for digesting protein. Remember, it doesn't digest anything else except protein, because this enzyme is highly specific. Okay, and this enzyme is the lock, and the protein is the key for this lock. Okay, so what does that tell you about this enzyme? This enzyme's optimum pH is actually pH 2. Makes sense, right? Your stomach will not be pH 2 and produce an enzyme if it doesn't want the enzyme to do its activity. So because it's produced in the stomach, pH 2, obviously the best pH for it is also 2. If the best pH is 10 and then it's produced in the stomach, it will be denatured because it's too acidic, too low. So the pH must match with the optimum pH. Now, your stomach can also function to store food for a very short while, okay, temporarily, and it's about 3 to 4 hours. Now, the entire process of digestion can actually be 12 hours. So your stomach can actually hold on to food for about 3 to 4 hours temporarily. Okay, so we talk about the first thing, putting food in the mouth. Your teeth will chew, your saliva will contain amylase to mix the food to make it soft. Your food will then travel down the esophagus by peristalsis to the stomach. So this is the third thing that we are talking about, right? Now in the stomach, your stomach got very muscular walls to mix the food, right? And when it mixes the food like a blender, it push and push, squeeze and push, squeeze and push, the pieces will become smaller. The next thing is that the stomach walls actually contain glands that secrete gastric juice. Now, gastric juice is basically a mixture of acid and enzyme. This enzyme doesn't digest starch, doesn't digest fats, it only digests protein. The third thing that the stomach also does, besides mixing food to make it smaller, mixing food with gastric juice so that the protein can be digested by the enzyme. The third thing the stomach actually does is that it keeps the food for a short while. So keeping is another word for store, but please don't use the word keep. We use the word store. Now, after the food enters the stomach, it's very soft already. Okay, it's like liquid. So where will it go to? This part here. The stomach will then push the food into the small intestine. But before we talk about the small intestine, remember your 3 organs that are not part of the alimentary canal? Yep, but they are closely associated. So we are going to be talking about the liver, which is this triangular shape here. Believe it or not, the liver is actually the largest organ in the human body. Bigger than your brain, bigger than your heart. It is the largest organ in the body. Okay, the next thing we're going to be talking about is your gallbladder. Now, your gallbladder is this small little structure that is actually very close to the liver, actually next to it. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to be talking about this organ known as the pancreas, which actually looks like a leaf, right? This is like it looks like the shape of a leaf. Okay, so this is the pancreas. Please spell the word pancreas correctly. Now, I know that this chapter, there will be a lot of words for you to learn how to spell, but I think we should see it as a positive challenge. Okay, don't give up. Miss Lee will definitely help you when you return to school. We will have a lot of spelling quiz so that we will be able to get this correct. Because if it's a labeling, definitely 4 marks. And these 4 marks you must take. Okay, so this will be my last slide, so hang in there for another 2 to 3 minutes and then we will call it a day to our lectures. Okay, now the liver is the largest organ in the human body. It produces a dark green liquid. Now this dark green liquid is actually known as bile. I'm not too sure whether you have experienced this before, but I can remember when I was in university and I had very bad gastric flu and I couldn't eat anything in my body at all. So I had no food in my body, but I kept wanting to vomit. And I realized that when I vomited all my food and there was nothing left in my stomach, I vomited this. I don't know whether you have experienced it, whether you have ever vomited this greenish, sourish liquid. Some of you have? Okay, if you haven't, this is my experience. And when I vomited it, I realized that it was green and it was sour. This is actually bile. Bile is green and it's not acidic, it's actually alkaline. Okay, that means it has a pH of more than 8. It's alkaline. Now, the good thing about bile is that bile has no enzymes. Remember, bile is not an enzyme. Okay, this is not an enzyme. Unlike your gastric juice that contains the enzyme to digest protein, your saliva contains amylase to digest starch, bile doesn't have any enzyme. So it cannot digest food. Then you might say, "Walao, Miss Lee, then why is it even produced in our digestive system?" Because bile has a very important thing. Bile helps to break up. Now, this is a large fat droplet. What does bile do to this? This is one large fat droplet. What does bile do? Bile makes this large fat droplet become smaller fat droplets. Now, this is not digestion because every single one of them is still fat. Haven't become fatty acid and glycerol. Remember fatty acid and glycerol? Okay, that is the one that makes up fat. That means it is still fat. Haven't got no chemical reaction yet. But bile basically take it and make it smaller. Okay, so bile helps to break up large fat into smaller fat droplets, and this process is actually known as emulsification. Okay, so the word emulsification. Now the word emulsify, it always got to do with fat one. Okay, remember your ethanol emulsion test for your chapter of nutrients. Okay, so the next organ that we'll be talking about is the gallbladder. Now the gallbladder, your liver is the one that produces bile. Okay, after it produces bile, the bile must go somewhere, right? The bile doesn't stay in the liver. So the bile actually goes to the gallbladder. The gallbladder is the refrigerator for the bile. Now, why I say refrigerator? In your fridge, you have food, right? You put the food in the fridge. So the gallbladder stores the bile, not for a long while, short while only. Why is it short while? Because the moment the stomach release the food into the small intestine, bile will be released. Okay, the gallbladder will release the bile because the bile is supposed to help break up, not break down, break up fat from large to smaller fat droplets. Okay, so it will release the bile via this long green tube. You can see Miss Lee's green red pen here. Small green tube like a channel. Okay, like a tunnel, and this is known as the bile duct. Now, in biology, anything with the word duct just means a tube. So it actually releases it through the bile tube. Okay, when you need it. If you don't need it, it won't be released. If you need it, it will be released. And usually when do you need it? When there is food that is present. Okay, so the liver produces the bile is stored and then released from the gallbladder. Next, you have your pancreas. Now, your pancreas is also very important. What it does is that it produces, that means it makes, and it secretes, that means it releases pancreatic juice. Now, here is my tip for you. Every time you hear the word juice, that means there must be an enzyme. And remember, what does an enzyme do? An enzyme will basically break down bonds. Okay, and when you break down bonds, you actually make the molecule become simpler because the bonds are already broken. Okay, so you get like atoms in that sense. Okay, so this pancreatic juice contains enzyme. And what does your enzyme do? This pancreatic juice is very good. Just now, the gastric juice, remember, only digests protein. The saliva only digests starch. So poor thing, only digests one nutrient. But this pancreatic juice is the most powerful. It's able to digest carbohydrates, proteins, as well as fats. So it can digest all three major groups of nutrients. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for listening to Miss Lee. I hope that you can consolidate all our learning. Today we learned about the alimentary canal. We learned about the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. We learned about peristalsis, which is the process that muscles contract to push food down our body even against gravity. We also learned about the function of the mouth that allows us to chew food, and saliva digesting carbohydrates, starch. We learned about the esophagus pushing food. Then we learned about the stomach, okay, containing gastric juice at pH 2 to digest protein. We also learned about the three organs closely associated with the alimentary canal: the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. Now, when you return next week, all right, we will do a simple recap, and then we will move on to the different functions of the small intestine, large intestines, before we talk about what the enzyme actually does inside these individual organs. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. Please complete your notes, take a picture of your completed notes and submit it via the Google Classroom now. I will see you next week. Bye bye 3A3.